All right, it's 12:01. I think we're going to get started.
We will kick off now. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. I am Kim Snyder, VP of Data Strategy at RoundTable Technology, and also presenting with me today is...
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Troidl. I'm the Director of Support Services here at RoundTable Technology.
Cool. So with that, I will get into our presentation. And let me share my screen, make sure all the settings are correct, and away we go. Oops. So the name of today's presentation, you could see that okay, Heather? Is that...
I can. We're in good shape, Kim.
Okay, good. So the name of today's presentation, will 2022 be your year of data? And I do believe it can be, and we both believe it can be, and that's why we are giving this presentation. And we're going to show you how that can happen. First of all, I want to introduce, for those of you who don't know us, RoundTable Technology. We are a strategic technology partner. We work primarily with nonprofit organizations, pretty much solely with nonprofits. And we are a strategic partner. So yes, we provide IT services and support, but we provide a range of other services. So do follow us in the various social areas, and you can keep up to date on the different programs we have. And we do a lot of educational programs. Okay, so we're going to start with a poll. Okay, and this is mostly to help us get a sense of who's joining us today. And this is the let's start where you are poll. And what is your primary role with respect to your organization's data? So hopefully everyone's seeing that poll. And you pick one, and it may be a little tricky to pick. Interesting. All right, I'm seeing a nice range. Okay. Give people another few seconds. And if there's not one that totally defines it, go ahead and pick something that's close enough. So I am going to, okay, we got a couple more people coming in. Okay, it's evening out. Interesting. Okay. All right. So I will go ahead and end the poll right now. And you can see we have a nice mix. And can everyone see that poll okay? The poll results? Okay. Anyway, so we have a mix of, okay, some decision makers, okay, so people who can make decisions about systems and processes and hiring people and things like that. There's what I call the guardian, and that's a very important role. So we have guardians here too, administrators for one or more systems. The technology whisperer, okay, so that's the informal administrator, and that initially was the one that was ahead. And we also have someone who's primarily involved in the data collection and entry side of things. So, oops. So that tells me that, can you, Heather, are we able to see the screen again?
Yes.
Okay, good. And the poll's gone away. Okay, oops. Go away. Okay, so, all right, so first of all, we are very, very familiar with nonprofit data pain. And so what is that, you may ask? Okay, the number one issue that I hear, and I've been working with nonprofits in the data area for 25 plus years, so for a while. So data silos, I would say, if I hear anything from people, that is one of the number one problems I hear. Our data is in all these different systems and we can't bring it together. Okay. Also, and these are two related kind of data pain points that we're aware are out there, what I call the money pit and the bad inheritance. Okay, so the money pit system is the database. It can often be a bad inheritance. They're both very related. The money pit is a database that's like so expensive. There's been so much money put into it that you don't want to leave it, but it's really not working for people. Okay, the money pit and the bad inheritance though can be a little bit different in that it's not necessarily a money pit. It can be that database that someone purchased or created a few years back or 10 or so years back, and no one really knows how to use it, and there's not much documentation on it. So that's the bad inheritance database. And we also have in a lot of nonprofits, because of these related problems, untrusted and unused data. So I've been to some organizations where I'll hear, oh, no, we don't really use the data. We kind of keep our own spreadsheets, or no, it's not really that good, right? So that's another pain point that can cause some real problems. And finally, and this is one of the big problems that, and this is often what motivates organizations to want to do something about their data, is the board meeting is coming and it's going to take us 2 weeks to put together this report. Oh, how I wish we could just push a button. Okay, so these are the common pain points. I'm sure some of you have other ones, and you know, you're always welcome to drop things into the chat, but these are the kind of general categories. So when we think about making 2022 your year of data, I'm going to start with a few assumptions here. Okay. Number one, and this is really, when we think about your year of data, we're really thinking about transforming culture or starting to adopt more of a data culture. And I want to emphasize now, and we will likely say this a few times in the presentation, and especially because we have a mixed audience of people with different levels of involvement with data. While you'll see the word organization used a lot, you can substitute another word, department, where you see that. I think that you can begin to have transformative culture in your organization by starting strong in one department. Okay, so if one of you is here and you're thinking, okay, this is really all good and nice, but I don't really have the control over our whole organization's data, you can use it in your department. So everyone in your organization or department is both a producer and consumer of data. Okay, and that means that people both enter it into the system, understand what goes into the system if they don't enter it themselves, but they also consume it. So at all levels across the organization, people are able to get information from it. Data issues, so the common problems, right? Often they manifest as an issue, as systems problems. Ugh, we need a new system. Can someone just get us a new data system? This one's terrible, right? And sometimes what happens is, yes, the system may be not perfect. And one of the important things to remember is that there are no perfect systems, okay? Sometimes it's not so much just the system, but it's the processes, okay? Think about how people are working with the data systems that they have, how people are coordinating that information. And so that's an important aspect of kind of your data configuration, to look at how are we using these systems we have. If we couldn't change systems, or if we had to wait some time to change systems, what processes might we change to do that? And ultimately, it's also a people thing, right? So how are people adequately trained to use the systems that we have? Do they understand what their role is in relation to the information that our organization or department uses? So this is another basic assumption. And actually, I'm going to take this a little bit and put it on its side here. it's really a lot a people thing. And a few years back, I did a project where we looked at finding the right system among a batch of different systems. And the thing is, we talked to people who were doing amazing things with even those systems that were labeled kind of problematic, but it's really how they used it and how they trained and gave people the right amount of information and instruction to use the systems, and also that they felt kind of part of this bigger picture. There was a conversation going on around data, around the organizational or departmental data. So it's always a combination of these three things, even if you have a horrible system. And sometimes if you don't work on the people and process stuff, if you have a not great system, what ends up happening is you bring that stuff right into the next system. Okay, this is another assumption. Sometimes we'll hear, oh, data, it's the new oil, right? And actually, we'd rather think about data as more of a soil than an oil, right? Yes, it is a very, very, very valuable resource. And that's why you'll hear this term about the oil thrown around, right? But the thing that's different about data is it's non-depleting, okay? It's regenerative, and there's nearly an unlimited supply, sometimes too much. It's relatively inexpensive to store, right? And data is, for the most part, unless you're talking Bitcoin, eco-friendly, right? So data, think about data as the soil for kind of growing better performance or effectiveness, right? Things grow out of it. It's a way to develop and improve like if service efficiencies and things like that for nonprofits, and how to build and solidify relationships with various constituent groups. So data is soil. Okay, the last assumption here is that data culture is a developmental process. All right, it does not happen overnight. It will not happen overnight. If you made 2022 your year of data and you kind of made some movement from one stage to another, that is a success, okay? And this is a roadmap kind of guide that we created because, and I should say, these different levels aren't mutually exclusive. Like you can have a little bit of data leader and still be contending with some silos. So it's not to say that every level is completely separate, but it's a helpful way that we found to think about the pathway to building the sort of data culture where you're going from data silos, manual reporting, a place where analytics are mainly descriptive, to when you're starting to develop, and we did have some tech whisperers here, a accidental data nerd, and sometimes tech whisperers make great data leaders, okay? And that's just a growth path for the organization and for people who are overseeing the data. So this is a developmental pathway, okay? And there are different characteristics at these different stages, especially thinking about levels 2 and 3, that are possible to put in place, again, for a department as opposed to for a whole organization. And we will give you a copy of this roadmap. I just want to talk about one thing that's a little bit unique to where we are at this time in history, or in kind of technology history. And that is, there's this idea of a kind of holy grail database where everything we have is in one system. And back in the day, and actually this was when I first started working with data nonprofits, this was a tool that we used. You built your own, and it was really expensive and only developers could do it. And then we moved into sort of an access, build your own database. And many organizations still have one or more of these access databases in operation. And then as we move into kind of 2000, 2010, Salesforce makes an appearance, and it makes an appearance with the Salesforce.org Foundation. And Salesforce was really a marked change because it was the first real cloud-based database service. Though then, as we get closer to where we are now, is the emergence of all these online services. Okay, and this is a whole smattering: HubSpot, QuickBooks, Zoho, Classy. These are data services that are relatively easy and inexpensive to set up, and they usually do one or more things pretty well. But what happens is they're very easy to set up. So sometimes in organizations and departments, people can go ahead and go off on their own and grab one of these systems, and then you're into data silos. And that's what I'm seeing a lot of actually more recently. But what's really emerging, and we want to keep an eye on this, and this is certainly something we're looking at Roundtable, is more this integration as a service, where it's not finding the holy grail, putting it all in one place, but it is using services that enable you to tie together data from these different systems. So that's part of the evolution of the data systems, but a lot of us are kind of right here with a lot of different systems. Okay, and I think, okay, so we do strive for this sort of perfect CRM that brings together finance, development, programs, marketing, and sometimes these different departments each get their own thing. And if we're thinking about at a departmental level instead of organizational, sometimes different programs have multiple systems. Okay, sometimes you'll have something else for volunteers. And then there's some organizations that have the central CRM system, right? And sometimes marketing, development are connected with that, or programs of volunteers. Often finance is off to its own system. Sometimes it's connected. But I think this vision right here is what a lot of organizations think they need to strive for today, or that's what would make us that's what would enable us to have a data culture. And actually we're seeing more different kinds of options with integration. But we did, and I think I transitioned now to Heather.
Thank you, Kim. Yeah, so we'd love to know, we've got a great group, diverse group here with us. We'd love to know, does your organization currently have a single source of truth, or what you think might be a single source of truth? So we're going to run another poll. Hopefully that poll is up there. It's only one question. So tell us where you are with your organization. We'll let that run for a few seconds. Someone asked a question in the chat: can a person count as a single source of truth? And obviously that is its own data silo. So no, we would answer. All right, looks like we've got some good results. I'm going to end the poll and share the results. It looks like the majority of us say no, we don't have a single source of truth, about 78% of us. And a few of us did say yes. Oh, and one person is saying, oh, change my yes to a no. So much more of us are saying no, we don't have a single source of truth. And we are probably all in agreement that we are in an area, just like Kim showed on the previous slide, we're in that cloud together, managing multiple systems, managing multiple data streams, and trying to figure out what on earth we should do. So with that, Kim's got a few ideas to share with you.
All righty. So, all right. So here's the thing. Removing data silos doesn't necessarily mean we have to have one single source of truth, which is probably good news for the many people who said we don't, right? Actually, let's think instead about data fiefdoms, okay? And, you know, a fiefdom was kind of a guarded space, like back in I guess medieval times, right? And that happens when there's a kind of a lack of fluidity or lack of conversation about the data. You can, and I think a lot of nonprofits, kind of the making of the silo has come from a few different things, right? It's come from departmental budgets, and it's also, or program specific budgets, and it's also come from these kind of data systems that funders have us use, and city and state funders. These can be systems where we just throw data in and never see it again. And that can also lead to data fiefdom. But let's think about destroying the fiefdom. Instead of we have to get to a place where we have one system, let's think about it instead as let's have a culture where this data is accounted for. We know it's there. We know what goes into it. And we have, it's part of our dialogue and part of our holistic understanding. Okay, so again, I talked about this earlier. So we can think about sort of the utopia of organizational data ownership, where there's all one system for one thing, or we can think about it departmentally. So just keep that door open. And I can't stress it enough, for 2022 to be your year of data, one department can really change things. So what is it going to take for 2022 to be your year of data? Okay, so we're thinking that if you do these 4 things, it could really make a difference. Okay, one is to own your data, and we're going to talk about each one of these and say what we really mean here. Own your data, know your data, maintain your data, and ask your data questions. Those 4 things. And again, whether it happens holistically across your organization or in one department or group of departments, these 4 things can be transformative. So let's talk about owning your data. Okay, and this is where we're thinking about data leadership. And we had some data whisperers here. So let's think about the accidental data nerd. You're good with data. You happen to be the go-to person. You're the one that the machine the system will talk to. Okay, the transformation from the role of the accidental data owner to the data leader is actually a quite natural one. When I talk to some organizations, they think, oh, we need a data leader. Does that mean, oh, we have to hire a data analyst and we don't have the budget for that? Well, not necessarily. If you have someone who's the kind of current, de facto guardian of your data, that person could develop into your organization's data leader. And we're going to talk about reasons why that's becoming more important. So what does a data leader do? A data leader ideally has a holistic view of what data is being collected, what data is moving through that given department. And the data leader either has direct decision-making ability or has access to the people who do have decision-making ability. Okay, and with those types of things, data leadership then oversees access. Who can get into the systems, who needs to get into the systems, who needs to run reports from the system. That's one of the things I used to see a lot at some nonprofits, is that no one was able to run reports, right? So a data leader makes sure that the people who need to get access to data can. Security, and that is becoming more and more of an important thing, a legal requirement. And making sure that the data systems are secure and that the data itself is protected. And that also comes from knowing what data you are collecting. What do you need to secure? Data quality, and Heather is going to be talking more later about how you maintain data quality, but a data leader is overseeing, part of having this holistic perspective is the ability to see what, where is our data needs some overall maintenance? What's our plan for making sure our data is a trusted source for people in the organization? Data governance, that's a lot to do with setting up standards for data collection, having clear ideas, why are we collecting this piece of information? And what information is required, what do we have to have, what information are we collecting that we don't really need. Okay, so governance is all about having standards, and also increasingly, as we get into an area where data privacy is more of an issue, governance becomes more important. Do we need to collect that? What are our standards for collecting and handling data and information? And by the way, when I say data, sometimes we're only the electronic kind, I actually also mean the paper kind. That counts, information. And skills development. Do the personnel who are using various systems have access to the training and the documentation that they need? Do we need to have a training path for people when they come and join our organization? Is there a basic training that people need to have? So this is the domain of a data leader. Okay, so that is really the first thing, and starting to tackle those. So now knowing what your data is means really knowing the what and the where of your data. And here we made a video, which is kind of funny because it's me talking, so you won't get a break from my voice. But I'm going to talk about information lifecycle, and we thought it was best to just show it. So conducting a workflow inventory is a first step in data management practices. Do you know where information lives in your department or organization, or how it moves through your organization, or who accesses it? Answering those questions can be quite a task for an entire organization. So if you're just beginning, it's best to get started in a department. Think of all information as having a basic life cycle. This applies to electronic data, such as records in a database, as well as spreadsheet files, and it also applies to paper files. In a lot of cases, the same information exists in both formats. Understanding where your data lives often involves having conversations with those closest to it. That includes people doing data collection or entry, as well as those who rely on the information to get their work done. Let's start with data collection. That answers the question, how do we first receive the data? How is it collected? Does it come by way of a website, an intake form, a sign-up sheet, or is it downloaded from another source? What happens once that data is collected? Is it initially reviewed or checked for accuracy? Is it entered into a system? And where is that information stored? Is it in a program, a spreadsheet, a database file? Is it filed away? How do people access that information once your organization has it? When we think about access, it's also important to consider data security. Are you collecting and storing personal identifying information such as name, address, phone, birth date, social security? And do you need to limit access to just certain staff? Is the information used in reports? If so, who generates those reports? Can information be downloaded? Is it prepared for use in another system? Finally, how long is the information stored? Do you have data disposal policies? Is there a point at which information outlives its business purpose for your organization and it makes more sense to securely dispose of it? The workflow inventory process may need to be repeated in different departments and in some cases multiple times for different programs. The information gained provides a foundation for understanding what data you collect, how you use it, and where vulnerabilities may exist. Okay, so conducting a workflow inventory. That was a lot of information. And for those of you who might be feeling overwhelmed, I realized that I should have said this at the very top. This webinar is really the first of a series that we're going to do. And so we're going to do deeper dives into some of these different areas. This is meant to be an overview. So if you're thinking, oh my goodness, I signed up for this thing for an hour and I've got to do all this stuff, hang on to the end, and because we want to hear from you what you want to learn more about. We're providing you with an overview of the range of responsibilities of developing data culture. So again, this is just the same information life cycle that we talked about. And it's basically knowing what you collect, where, and where it moves through your organization at these different stages. Is it analyzed? Is it stored? Where is it stored? What are the places? Who can access it? How secure is it? And its disposal. And I'm aware that a lot of nonprofits don't really have data disposal policies, and those are newly having to emerge because of laws like New York Shield and things like that. So that's certainly something we can think and talk about more. We do have a resource, and you will receive this via email from us. It's basically a worksheet that takes you through the process of what information are we collecting and what happens to it across this life cycle. Starting to document that, just filling out one of these forms for a program in a department is a step forward, and it's a step toward owning this data and knowing what's there. This is the where part of that, and this is knowing what different systems we have, right? Where are different, where do we have different data collection points, signups, communication? So what are the various systems? And again, one of our follow-up sessions that we offer an option for is diagramming. So these kinds of diagrams don't have to be daunting. One of the things I do like to note, though, with data systems inventories is you want to think, you see a lot of these Excel icons. People often don't think of Excel as sources of data, but if you move your data there, if you collect it there, Excel or Google Sheets, it does become a part of your data inventory. So this is knowing the where of it. What does our constellation look like? I do want to talk for a moment about data liabilities, and that's something we're having to think more about because of data privacy laws, and specifically New York Shield, which covers more organizations. Basically, anyone with a budget over three, actually it covers all organizations, but it will allow for kind of reasonable adjustments for organizations with either under 50 staff or under 3 million in revenue. But it does covers New York resident data. So personally identifying information belonging to New York residents. And these can be things, well, definitely social security number, but birthday, address, contact information, these things, if they can personally identify someone. The thing that the New York Shield law changed is around account numbers. Like if an account number gets out there, particularly an account number with a password or an email and a password, if that gets you into an account. So the what type of data is liable is personally identifiable information, or you will also hear it called PII. And also constituent data with no business purpose, like a constituent that you worked with 15 years ago that you've not seen and is probably not coming back. Do you need that data? It may include some personally identifiable information, which makes you a little bit more vulnerable, but you start to think about in your life cycle, is there a disposal point? And sometimes the constituent data that you really don't need anymore can make you liable. And the where, okay, this is the other liability aspect, what and where apply here too. Informal sources. I've seen data of a very personal nature collected in paper forms that were then more accessible than was probably good. Okay, also information that exists in multiple locations. So if people, then it's what happens is it's harder to track down and it's harder to know where things are, because part of, if an organization gets breached, you need to know what all got affected and where everything is and whose records got affected. Okay. and any data that's downloadable or transportable. And that is, if I can download an entire record set from the cloud, then all of a sudden that record set can be on my computer, which then causes a vulnerability for my organization. And so now I pass it to Heather.
Thanks, Kim. Happy to give you a little break from speaking, but all really, really good, important things. And so if you remember, we started off by saying there were 4 critical things you could do to make this your year of data. And so item number 3, we want to talk about maintaining your data and data quality. And I think for Kim and I, one of the things that we really feel strongly about is helping people understand that data maintenance isn't a job, it's a process. It doesn't belong with one person in the organization to clean up once. It's not one and done. It's an ongoing evolution. And so we have some, some data to share with you to help carry on how critical it is. So one of the, this is some great data we got recently from Gartner, and we wanted to look at, when we talk about data, and we'll use contact data in this case, because it applies to just about every organization. We wanted to understand, how often is that data decaying or becoming stale or irrelevant? And we found it's at about 3% a month. That doesn't sound too scary, right? 3% a month. But when you annualize that and look at it over the course of a year, that actually ends up being 37.5%, the amount in an average organization that the contact data goes bad each year. 37.5%. That's over a third. That's over a third of the data that we're using to market to our customers for sales. That's a lot of data. And unfortunately, what we're also finding is that COVID's causing that decay rate to increase. Not by a ton, but still by a smidge, which is scary because it's on the upward trend, not the downward trends. So when we think about the fact that over a third of our data goes bad every year, data maintenance becomes such a critical component to our overall data strategy for our organization. Next slide, Kim. Thank you. So one of the things we can do as we think about maintaining our data is to audit our data regularly. And this, this can sound for those that haven't been in this space very much, it can sound a little daunting, a little scary, but there's many ways to audit your data and many ways to start small, especially at the departmental level. And that's as simple as asking yourself, do you already know where problems exist? Do you already get reports or information that you know to yourself? I know I can't really trust those numbers. That data is it's always been kind of funky. That you already dismiss because you're not happy with it. You already know, and your users know where some of those problems already are. And that's a really great way to get started with data auditing. You can also do record sampling, where you just randomly take a sample of your records, especially for those of you that are using systems like HubSpot or Salesforce, or you have intake forms on your websites. It's really easy to take a random sampling of those and take a close look at it. See where there may be gaps, duplicates. You're asking for things that don't feel relevant anymore. It's a really easy way to start doing some data auditing. Another easy way to get started is reporting gaps. Where do you have gaps in your reports where, again, either the data isn't great, you're not confident with it, or even more importantly, what reports do you wish you could get from your data that don't even exist yet? That's a gap, and that's another piece of data auditing. Next slide, Kim. And especially when we think about the data that's we don't have, missing data is even harder to find. So for those of you that can't tell, that's our little icon of a milk carton. With data as the missing person on the back. And so missing data can be even more critical because you're not able to generate the reports and the analytics and the information that you need. And a really great way to start working around managing missing data is exception reports. And so again, especially for those that have CRM systems like Salesforce or HubSpot or Microsoft Dynamics, utilizing exception reports or filters, or easily building a list of, show me all of my contacts that don't have this or that, whether it's a billing code, an email address, a partner ID, gives you a set of data that you can start working on and cleaning. And most importantly, too, for those that are using those systems, it gives you some insight into where you might want to add validations into your intake process to be able to cut off the missing data at the source. All right, number 4, ask your data questions. As we look at making this your year of data, we want you to ask your data questions. Next slide, Kim. Thank you. And before we can ask the data questions, we want to make sure that everybody is looking at the same thing. And we think it's so important as we develop data cultures within our departments, within our organizations, that the first step is speaking the language of data. It's providing personnel with context, the big picture. When everyone can understand the larger purpose of the data, including how it might be connected, how it might be interfacing with other systems, other departments, flowing throughout the organization, everyone's going to understand the larger purpose. So for example, you can see, I believe Kim, I know I'm not a native New Yorker, but I believe this is the New York City Marathon routes.
It is indeed.
Yep. And we're showing again a clear start line, clear finish line, but all those different dynamics flowing through. You need a visual roadmap to help people understand that. Otherwise, you're just kind of running to nowhere over and over. And you kind of don't know where you're going. You kind of don't know what's around you. You're in a data abyss. And so being able to provide that big picture and context to folks that are working with you and on your data is really, really critical for success. All right. And again, why is that so critical? Because we want to get our organization higher up through our path here. And so as we're asking our data questions, we're asking it to do different things like descriptive analytics. Go ahead, Kim, press the button, diagnostic analytics. And thirdly, predictive analytics, which for data geeks like Kim and I, we love these terms. For some of you, these terms might be a bit new. So Kim, our next slide, will give you an easier way to digest this. So it's really about asking your data, what happened? What's going on? Show me a summary. That's what descriptive analytics are. Why did something happen? Why is this situation occurring? That's diagnostic analytics. And lastly, how could it happen, or what can we expect in the future? That's predictive data analytics. And being able to ask your data all of these questions ultimately is the goal, because we want to get to a point where we're able to feel comfortable with our data, not only to describe and summarize it, but to be able to use it to gain knowledge and insight about what may happen, and most importantly, feel confident that we can use it within the organization to guide decisions and also to predict and feel more confident in decision making throughout every level of the organization. That's a lot. And Kim and I both shared that path. That's a really complex path, and there's a lot of endpoints on it. So one of the ways, if you're not ready to immediately go and ask your executive director for a lot of money to completely transform your business and how the data operates, which I kind of think most of us aren't lucky enough to be in that camp. One of the great things you can do as a data owner, even if you're a departmental data owner or a data whisperer, is you can encourage what we love to call here at RoundTable, encourage small experiments or act with a design thinking mindset. So think about where you could do some small changes, some small experiments where you could build them yourself, run them, measure, see what happens, learn from them, and do that cycle again, or invite other colleagues from other areas to participate. Again, some examples might be instituting some of those validation rules if you're running HubSpot or Salesforce and you don't have those. It's maybe thinking about looking at some of the intake forms that your department uses that you collect on your websites and saying, are we collecting duplicate data? Could we remove some of these fields? Maybe we should refresh this and normalize it. Those are all simple, small experiments that you can run and take control of your data. That doesn't need a big, costly, organizational-wide investment or large-scale project. Small changes can give us big lifts, even in our data. And I know, Kim, you agree. We're doing the same thing here at RoundTable right now as we embark upon managing our marketing data in a new and different way.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is starting to get conversations going about the data, right? Talking to your data. And remember at the very beginning, we said everybody is both a producer and a consumer of data. And I know that there were some who answered that they're more in the end of kind of working with the data directly or entering the data. So when we engage everyone in the conversation, we can get insights and perspective from across the data lifecycle, actually. And you might get some good ideas for some small experiments. Like as Heather was saying, do we need to collect this? Are we collecting it twice? What if we also collected this? What would this tell us? Right? And again, start small. So speaking of starting small, the year of data is indeed a journey, a developmental path, as we said at the beginning, right? No one, RoundTable with Heather and I both working heads down on this stuff, it's going to take some time, and there are new things to learn and new things to prioritize and do. So when we set this up as the year of 2022, the year of data, we assumed it would be a journey, and we assumed that there was much to learn along the way. And so to that end, we have, and I believe we have our last poll here, we're interested in understanding what types of things you would like to learn more about. We're in the process of really thinking through some of the ways we can deliver this kind of information to people. So, we are putting together classes that will be webinar and perhaps other formats. And we want to make the topics that are the most relevant or the most in need to you available. And so I am going to set up at one more poll. Oops. And this is the next session's poll, which I'm going to launch. I'd just like to hear which of these would people who are here be interested in attending another webinar, receiving an ebook, getting some video training, things like that. Are there other topics out there that you want to learn about? And we'd be happy as we develop the year of data curriculum to really shape it around what people need and what people are asking for.
And if you see a topic that you're interested in that we don't have listed, feel free to put that in the chat.
Yeah, let us know if there are things that we don't have here, which I'm sure, oops, we don't. So, alrighty. Data management best practices appears to be leading the pack. And okay, also kind of close seconds are your life cycle inventory and data privacy. I personally, I feel like we have much to learn and teach about data privacy. And some of that will be encompassed in data management best practices. So as I wasn't sharing the results, but here you go. So it looks like there isn't anything that's not that interesting to people, though people are a little bit less around selecting software as a service options. And someone else mentioned in the chat record retention policies and practices. And that's absolutely would fall under both the data lifecycle inventory. So part of conducting that, part of being able to go into that in a deeper level would be in that class, and also thinking about data privacy, because there are different requirements around data disposal and record retention. But yes, having one of the big jobs of a data leader is to have is one of the main roles of a data leader is to kind of oversee, again, this classification, right? The full life cycle. So I think there's one more slide. I think, is this you, Heather? I believe so.
I think it is. Thanks, Kim. All right. So we'll just close that poll. And, we do want to thank everybody for coming. We have a few minutes after I finish talking about this slide. We'll have a few minutes after for a little Q&A. If folks would like to put any questions that you have, you can put them right in the chat and we'll take those and answer. But we always like to end this with saying kind of what's next for you. And we'd like to give out some freebies to thank you for coming, but things that you find useful. So we're really excited that we have a new data checkup form, and we'd like to offer everybody who's on this webinar the opportunity to sign up for a free data health check with Kim. You can go to our websites. You have the link right there. It's also going to be in the follow-up email that comes from this webinar, but we have a simple little form for us to help start that conversation with you. So we're really interested in doing some consulting and helping you get started if you're interested. We also have the New York Shield playbook that Kim mentioned earlier, talking about Shield, talking about how important that is. So we have a playbook and some resources there for folks that are interested. And the information inventory worksheet that Kim showed earlier in the presentation today, we have that for you as well. Our marketing guru, Justin, I don't know if he's going to pop on his camera and say hello, but Justin, do you just want to let people know about the change to our email and how to make sure that they are able to receive all this great stuff from us?
Definitely. So outreach at roundtabletechnology.com is how we will be reaching you after the webinar today, and how most of our mailings do go out. So if you want to check for your spam about 30 minutes after this webinar, make sure it's not in there, or put us on your trusted sender list. That would help out a lot.
Awesome. So Kim, I'm going to toss it back to you for wrap up and Q&A.
Well, I don't see any, let me see. I don't see any Q&A. I will say that we presented a lot of stuff for people today. And so know that this is a journey. You will get these resources. And we do, when we say year of data, we don't mean 1 hour webinar session of data. So, I really, keep an eye out, and what Justin said about the outreach email, because we will be pushing out both information and other educational opportunities around building a data culture at your organization. It is doable, one step at a time. Okay. So if we don't have questions with that, we'll give you a few minutes back today. And thank you so much for attending.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We're really glad that you were here with us today.